Mitch, I've been kind of, this fits my wheelhouse, so I'm trying not to stoke the fire. I want to talk about Dvoracek a little, but zero surprise that the conversation took on the cultural context that Coach Sat led it off with.
Um, yeah. First of all, it kind of dawned on me when he started up there that he hadn't said anything publicly since it all went down in November, and Holgerson came in, and everybody wondered, well, where's Sat gonna go? And then bowl season came around, and there was a period of time where I think we operated just kind of under the assumption that he wouldn't be a part of the staff in 2025, and then Rule shot that down, and Dana continued to say how much he enjoyed working with Marcus. And some of that, like, there's a cynical way to look at this where you're just like, yeah, okay, he's the highest paid coach on staff. Like, what is he going to do? Of course, he's going to want to stay, and that's not. I don't subscribe to that, because a lot of coaches, I think, would have just been kind of difficult to work with, and just you can make it so you're not a great fit. And he could have done that in November during the last 3 games of the year and into bowl practices, and they would have let him go, and then they would have had to pay him, and he would have done less work and made the same amount of money, and it would have been normal practice in college football. But instead, he was like, no, I take him at face value what he said, like that he believes in Nebraska, and he wants to help this place, and he's having a lot of fun coaching right now. So it's a rare way for this thing to turn out. I was maybe a little surprised, because in the past, Satterfield hasn't like opened up probably in the way that he did. I don't know if he's had the opportunity to open up like that, but it was there on Tuesday. And yeah, he gave a real, I think, insightful, not just coach talk answer about why he why he stuck it out, and why he played along, why he was a good sport, why he didn't just make himself a thorn in the side on the offensive staff, and then they would have bought him out at the end of the season.
Mm.
Mitch, how much impact do you think that can have on the team? I know that, DB and I have talked a lot about how maybe that impacts the way fans perceive Satterfield moving forward, but to be a example of some of the things that he's preaching, how much impact do you think that can have? Because this isn't a situation a coach generally can show, living, like practicing what they preach in this sense that, you've got a Heinrich Harburg or an Emmett Johnson who maybe their playing time hasn't been what they've wanted it to be up to this point. He's a real example of kind of that same thing.
Yeah. I, I think it can. I think it can help. I think in individual cases, if something comes up during the season where he's working with a player, and he probably will, because at tight end, it's such an interesting group to have the four guys at the top. And I'm looking at it as four. Maybe somebody else will jump into that mix, and two of them are hurt right now, so they're wild cards. But um, they can't. They're not going to all play at the same time. Like, somebody's going to be unhappy about something, and he's well positioned, I think, to be able to have conversations. It doesn't have to be with the tight ends. Like, he has relationships with other players on the offense, as you mentioned, like in talking about Emmett Johnson, Ravi, because he's been their coordinator for the better part of the last 2 years. So I think that they'll listen to him, and it's more than just talking to them. I think those guys can probably just see it, and they can see the way he's not pulling the wool over people's eyes. Like, he legitimately wants to be at Nebraska. And if that's the case, and I think it is, then I'm sure the players can tell in the way that he goes about his daily business. So that can have an impact on them when they run into a spot that just isn't like all perfect. And as they drew it up.
Hey, Mitch, I want you to listen to this clip from Coach Dvoracek and kind of walk me through the feel in the room about the connection of the coaching staff when you hear this answer. Shane, play clip one from Dvoracek.
Just focus it on the team. And I think he spoke about that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I've been with coach for a long time, so I kind of know what the standards are, the expectations are, and what he expects from us as a staff and the players. And I think, coach has been persistent in all of those things over the years. And so just making sure the team is right, and obviously holding all of us accountable as coaches and players.
more or less important in this phase of Coach Dvoracek's career, Mitch, or more applicable because of the new faces that are on the staff, in addition to some of those guys that have familiarity?
I think it's big for Rob in this part of his career because now he's like he's comfortable in this spot where he's been given responsibility, and he's the longest tenured member of the defensive staff who is in a role that hasn't changed, or just the longest tenured member of the defensive staff. Period. Everything around him has shifted in his 3 years. So everybody else is new, and like they're definitely going to look to him, the players, and I think the other coaches, like to provide some stability and perspective on, hey, we've tried this before against this opponent. How did this go, Rob? Or what was your viewpoint on that? And like I asked that question to him about Matt Rule and like what he'd seen in Rule this spring, because I was curious after listening to Rule on Saturday talk about how he was bored at practice. And like I know he said that kind of tongue in cheek, like he's never really bored. But maybe in that moment when he made the comment to Mike Eckler and he was just recounting it for us on Saturday, he actually felt that way because his mindset at practice is so much different now than it was the last couple of years, because he has so many people in positions where he trusts them and trusts them more, like trust them because of their experience, trust them like because there's just more people out there, and everybody's plate is a little bit more manageable, at least at practice. Like, away from practice, there's a whole new world of college football that you're grappling with, and things can get unwieldy pretty quick. But like when he's at practice, I can understand why Rule might feel that way. And Dvoracek, I think he was expressing it too, that this has given Rule an opportunity to like take more of a big picture focus on stuff. And Rob's a part of that. Like he's one of those pieces that Rule can trust, despite being young and just in his early 30s. Like I think when Rule talks about, he kind of went through a list on Saturday. He's like, well, I'm not going to go over and meddle in the offensive line because Donnie does this. I'm not going to go mess with special teams because X got, I'm not going to go with Dana. I think Dvoracek fits right into that conversation too, with the work he does with the linebackers.
He's so good. Excuse me. Rob, he's so good behind the mic now. You can tell his level of comfort in terms of what the information he wants us to know, how it fits with the message with what everybody else is saying. He's grown tremendously in that area as a guy that understands how the media works here.
Yeah, he's just smart. And yeah, I got that from the first time that I met him. I'm not talking about a press conference, just like met him away from the press conference setting. You definitely, some guys, like he has a high like social, emotional intelligence, and you don't always see that in assistant coaches. I mean, certainly plenty of them have it, and they need it to be able to recruit and to identify with recruits' families and players and all of that. So I'm not saying it's like a lost trait, but he naturally had that, and just like the ability to just converse and see people as people, instead of whatever role that they might serve. So yeah, he's like, to me, future coordinator material for sure. Like I think that's the path that he'll go in his career, and who knows, maybe a ways beyond that.
Mitch, as you had a chance to see a little bit of practice yesterday, like anything stand out? I know a lot of people are tweeting out pictures about body types and body transformations and things like that. I know what you actually get to see from a football standpoint is limited, but anything stick out to you?
Well, I went on the offensive side. So because of the torn up outdoor fields, they're splitting practice and for some of it. So the defense was in the Hawks and the offense was in the stadium. And I went over to the offensive side, like, because I said I was hoping that Rule was there with the offense, and he was. So I wanted to watch him and see what it looked like to be bored. But so the receivers were probably what stood out to me. I watched the O-line quite a bit the first time we were out at practice. And so I, saw Saw Pritchett, super impressed with Pritchett's, like, his physical presence. Like, he's what you'd expect for somebody who started at Alabama as a tackle. So kind of been down that road already in my viewing time. So I watched the receivers on Tuesday and could see like a top group, and just like the way that the guys were carrying themselves, like the way they took their reps and lined up and stood together. And that appeared to be Janiron Bonner, Nizia Hunter, Ja'Cory Barney, and Dane Key. And like, I like the way that those guys complement each other with their skill sets and their body types, and what their speed, size, experience, all of that. It's two more experienced guys, and then two others who've played 1 year. So they all have experience. And I think that Isaiah Mosey, Cortez Mills, and Quinn Clark are going to be like constantly pushing to get in there. And maybe there's somebody in that young trio who's already in that group, like Barney was last year. And we saw that in the spring game. We won't get that sneak peek this year. So we'll have to wait until August to kind of find out if there's a freshman that's cracked the top group with the receivers. But that's what I watched the most. I mean, of course, the quarterbacks, they were throwing to the receivers, but probably stood out to me. Those guys stood out to me quite a bit in the time I spent with the offense.
So, Mitch, let me ask you, if you're kind of watching this thing unfold and you're around the offense, how difficult do you think it is, or would you imagine it to be, to do the things that you needed to do to contribute in this offense at a high level from a trust standpoint?
As a player?
Yeah, I want to start with the wide receiver group, because sometimes we kind of put stuff on young guys, but you just rattled off that group, and outside of Barney, it's highly experienced guys. So are you drawing any parallels to kind of what it takes to get acclimated in this offense versus what we're actually kind of anticipating?
Yeah, I think they're going to lean on guys so that they know they can trust, because they've actually gone out there and done it. And I mean, I think Hunter and his experience is pretty comparable to Barney, and Barney's is his 1 year is at Nebraska, so he's probably higher on the trust level than Hunter at this point, just because he's been in the system and in the program and has a connection, a chemistry already that's deeper with Dylan Raiola than what Nizia Hunter as a new guy would have. But they're going to close that gap, and by the time that they get out and play a couple games, I think they're going to that group of four is probably all going to be pretty equal. Yeah, I don't know if it means like that they're going to be less likely to want to bring along young players, but I do, as you go over to the defensive side. I know you asked the question about offense, but I think it applies to defense too. I do think maybe more than in the first couple years with Rule, that you're going to see them bring along freshmen. There'll be exceptions to this, but you're going to see them bring not just freshmen, but inexperienced players. You're going to see them bring those guys along. They're going to have the luxury to bring them along a little more slowly, or just like appropriately, like in the way that a program that expects to win 9 or 10 games would do it. Not that I expect Nebraska to win 9 or 10 games. I don't know. Maybe by August, I'm not making that call right now. But like, they're going to act like a big boy program in the way that they bring young players along, and a lot of that's because of trust, and it's a luxury that you can afford to have. Like on the D line, you see the guys who are there in the front, and it's Van Poppel and Judy and Lenhart, and they've all been in the program for 2 years or more. And the maybe more physically imposing, impressive, high ceiling guys, Williams Winery and Keona Davis, like they're going to bring them along. Like they're going to work with them. They're going to fully invest in those players. Same thing with Mosey and Mills on the offensive side. I think same thing when they get healthy with Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt at linebacker. But like there's an ability now to take a little bit more time, and it should be something. I'm sure it's something that they expect will pay off in the long run.
So, Mitch, let me get you out on this. With you and I have talked about, I'm going all the way back to these hearings and what people thought, and I said, well, how can you pull this off without collective bargaining? And I think you were on board early with, yeah, it seems like an important piece that is not talked about it's being talked about out of order. Were you encouraged, discouraged with what Claudia, kind of the findings? What were some sticking points to her I think it starts with collective bargaining and probably that being a good idea. But how about the staggered getting down to 105 too? Which one of those, if either, or interests you the most in terms of how you think this may go?
Yeah, all of the issues that she brought up, that the judge brought up on Monday, I think are like deserving of full conversations. But the 105, the roster limits, probably it probably piqued my interest the most because it's just something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and talking to people about around
I go
Nebraska. And
back
like,
to what you said
yeah,
to me in October. You
uh
you said in the press box, you said, "How can you wait a certain amount of time and then
yeah.
okay, just make it happen?" You said it doesn't feel like that would be right.
And it's still that now that they've done that, it doesn't feel right because Nebraska recruited its 2025 class with the understanding and under the operating procedure that it was doing it with the 105 in mind. It had all these conversations, Rule and I think mainly just Rule, but Rule had all these conversations with players who had eligibility left after the regular season, even before the bowl game, about where you fit on the 105. I think players made decisions to transfer because they didn't expect that they were going to they thought they'd have a better opportunity somewhere else as a result of the 105, not because they were not wanted at Nebraska, but just because of the realities in college football. And they've been recruiting in 2026 and making scholarship offer decisions, knowing that they would have to be at 105 in August. And here we are on April 7th, and you're like, oh, well, they're going to grandfather players in, and you're not going to have to be at 105, and maybe you could be at 120 or something like that in this year. Like what? That's yes. The timing of it is out of whack, but that's just where we are in college sports. And it's not going to be a perfect system. It's definitely not a perfect system. It's messed up a lot of a lot of plans because the timing has gone the way it did. I'm sure there were a lot of coaches, not at every school. I'm sure there were a lot of coaches who kind of threw up their hands on Monday when they heard about this and said, this would have been nice to know 6 months ago or 8 months ago.
Mitch, is there anything that because I saw you tweeting along and kind of following this pretty closely. Is there anything that you saw as the proceedings were kind of going along that raised your ears a little bit and made you think, that could hold this thing up?
No, I think that everybody's got too much invested now for the NCAA is going to take this week and come back. If it's next month, I don't know if they set a date for the next hearing next Monday, whatever. She said take a week, and they're going to come back and they're going to reword things in the way that the judge wants. Like they know that she's the one who ultimately has to approve it. So you'll probably see some kind of a system that allows teams to get down to 105 over a period of years. I mean, there some of it I think is just reworded language. I know she made a big point about the 10-year-old playing
Fathered in, yeah.
yeah, and I don't know. I'm not enough of a legal expert to know like what needs to change to make that to appease the judge in that area, but the lawyers are, and I'm sure they'll do whatever is necessary. I don't think there's big sticking points. She was pretty optimistic and pretty positive in like her overall assessment of where they're at.
That's our guy, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate it as always. You guys going to get some baseball outside this week?
Yeah, we've already done that. We played last night. So
cool.
two more this weekend. Yeah, we got 5 games under our belt, man.
So is it Masters weekend? Like, what are we doing, Mitch? You couldn't prolong that thing?
Yeah, it's I'll catch some golf when I get the chance, but
that's what the added library is for, right? Just record.
yeah, no, I'm not. No, I don't like to record live sports and go back and watch it. I'll just catch up. Maybe I'll if I'm really interested, which isn't always the case, but if I'm really interested, I'll get my phone out or something. We're not playing all weekend. We got 1 game Sunday, 1 game Saturday.
How do you keep up if you don't?
Well,
record
I
live
probably don't. Maybe I don't keep up. Maybe I just fake it.
You're too much, man.
Mitch,
all right.
We appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mitch.